Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. We have an unbelievable guest tonight, an unbelievable show. Scott Rouse is a body language expert and analyst and trains law enforcement and military in interrogation and body language. How unbelievably cool this is going to be. And what we're really going to be targeting on, besides anything that Scott wants to talk about, is this individual right here, Bryan Kohberger, who has that sort of psychopathic stare, as according to Scott Rouse, who even has this defined as a specific body language trait by people like this. And also, we'll maybe take a look at Stephan Sterns and the body language that he emanates to his interviewers and interrogators, but very, very obvious. And I think that Scott is so talented at this that he could show us things that aren't so obvious. Don't forget, myself, Phil Grimaldi, and Mike Geary are all retired NYPD. So we have some training in this, mostly on-the-job training. We would have loved to have had someone like Scott actually teach us what to look for in this. Anyway, folks, hold on to your hats. Hold on to your loved ones. Hold on to your opinions. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone. The police off-the-cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. BetOnline continues to be your number one source for all your sports betting action. And with baseball in full swing and football season around the corner, BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting. From Major League Baseball, UFC to tennis, and NFL futures, BetOnline remains your choice for sports wagering info. In between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. Head to the website today and take advantage of their industry-leading VIP program with level-up bonuses and weekly cash boosts. BetOnline, the game starts here. Joining me tonight as co-host, we have retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, and attorney. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary.
Bill, thank you for having me on. Good to see you. Good evening.
And we have straight out of Brooklyn, retired NYPD detective Phil Grimaldi. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you for having me, Billy. I think this is going to be a great show.
I do too. And of course, we have, who I just sort of introduced before, body language expert and the host of the behavior panel on YouTube, Scott Rouse. Scott, welcome.
Oh, thank you very much. Now, I've got a problem with my microphone because this thing isn't hooking up. And so I'm listening to speakers through my computer and my microphones through my computer. So what I can do.
You sound okay.
You sound good. Because I can run and get another mic and try to get that to work.
Well, I think it's sounding okay. If we have a problem, then you'll have to have another mic. But right now, it sounds good.
Yeah,
sounds good, Mike.
You know, Scott, what I wanted to ask you about, and you actually have it in one of your right here, the psychopathic stare.
Yeah.
And then as compared to the psychopath versus the sociopath. And pretty cool. I mean, I didn't know there was that much of a difference. Could you explain that to us?
Well, the psychopathic stare, most people think it's this evil look that whoever the psychopath is staring at him. And what's happening there is the psychopath, their brain isn't working properly. The limbic system, specifically the amygdala, usually there's a lot of other things going on in there at the same time, but I like to boil it down to this little nutshell thing to make it so it's easy to understand. So the amygdala isn't working properly. Now, that's the thing that lets you know when things bother you, when you feel sorry for someone, or you see a little animal get hurt, and you go, oh gosh, I bet that hurt. That doesn't work because the amygdala isn't functioning properly. So with the psychopathic stare, you've got somebody that if you and I were in a club or a bar and we look at somebody, and as soon as you don't even realize you're staring at them, they look at them, they look at you, and you look away because it bothers you, because you just got busted, or it's just weird looking at somebody that you don't know for that long. So what happens is the psychopath keeps looking because they don't get that feeling that this is wrong. This bothers me, that they must feel this weirdness as well because they don't feel that weird, that odd feeling that we feel. I don't know how to make that any smaller or any tighter.
Well,
But
Scott, can I just stop you for 1 second? Isn't that really from the animal kingdom? When you look someone directly in their eyes, isn't that a challenge to either an animal or a human being? It's like a challenge.
it is when your limbic system is working normally. But for a psychopath, they don't feel those feelings they should be feeling because they don't have the equipment to do that. A lot of things that are in the zeitgeist for psychopaths is totally wrong. And a lot of people get a lot of information from places that aren't valid, and they're not complete, the information. So when you hear things like that, you go, I've always known it was like this. I've always known that psychopaths did this. Well, a lot of times it's not true. For example, a lot of people think psychopaths are brilliant. They think psychopaths, they're not. A lot of them are just doofuses. It's just that their brain isn't functioning properly for whatever reason. They could be born that way, which is what happens most of the time, or they could be in an accident, have that part of their brain damaged, which happens not all the time, but it's not uncommon at all. And that person will have a psychopathic brain at that point. And you can tell from the fMRI studies.
Now, when we talk about, as I have on this thumbnail here, the lies are in his eyes, and Kohberger, of course, tells lies, or there's a lot of emotion, whether it's empty emotion, whatever it is in his eyes. But in my studies of body language, when someone is being truthful, their eyes will get larger. The pupils will get larger. When someone's lying, they will get very small. Thus comes the term, he had beady eyes, because person lying, their pupils get smaller. But for an interviewer, an interrogator to get so close as to be able to see the pupils, that's not really, I don't know. It's not really practical, I don't think.
Well, quite often when if you see somebody in your family, your wife or one of your children, your eyes will dilate a little bit because your brain is taking in all the information it possibly can about that person because you like them or you love them. And when you see something that you disagree with or that scares you, they'll get wide as well. So there are different reasons that the eyes dilate and don't dilate. And for psychopaths, the only time, or the major amount of time that their eyes will dilate is when they see fear, or they see something, they know someone's in trouble, or they're afraid of them. That's when they dilate. And when it comes to deception and the eyes dilating, it's really tough. It's a really tough call. Like you said, it's tough to get that close. It's tough to measure them. It's tough to see it. It's tough just to focus on that. You know how it is when you're sitting there. If you just started doing that, it would look weird, and it's going to mess everything up. That person's going to start feeling weird, and they're going to be thinking something else, and they're totally off the track of where you're trying to put them from a psychological perspective.
Scott, everyone watched last week, I believe it was, of Bryan Kohberger, and how absolutely cold he was when all he said was, when he was asked if he murdered these human beings, all he said was yes. Let me play a little bit of this just to see the unemotionalness of his responses.
And let me ask you, did you, on November 13th, 2022, enter the residence at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, with the intent to commit the felony crime of murder?
Yes.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogan, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Gonzalez, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, and with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
And did you do that willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation and malice of forethought?
Yes.
And then on or about November 13th, 2022, again in Latah County, Idaho, did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
So again, basically no emotion there.
Right.
Just yes. But talk to us about the rigidness of his body.
Okay, we can look at this from a couple of different perspectives, because this is also the same behavior you'll see in someone who's on the autism spectrum, because quite often that person will just give straight answers. There's no emotional attachment to those things. There may be emotional attachment to them, but you don't see it on them. You know, people with autism, they have emotions and they feel bad and they feel sorry and they feel lonely and those feelings. When you're dealing with a psychopath, they're not always just like this, what we're seeing here. This is common behavior for that, but it's not the only time the only kind of behavior we see in those situations. So a lot of times the psychopath will be someone that everybody loves. They think they're the most fantastic person. They're gregarious. People like them. They get a lot done. They're in charge of something. They always try to put themselves in a position of power, and people really like them. Most of the time when women meet a psychopath and they end up getting married to him, they think that's the most wonderful person they've ever met in their lives, because what the psychopath does is he reflects you. He shows you you. He starts doing the things you do. He starts talking about the things you like. He starts, if you do this a lot, if you sit this way, he may mirror you and start sitting that way too. We all do that when we are around somebody we like, or that's someone we want to be like, or a hero or something like that. But so we'll match them, and we'll talk the way they talk, and we'll mirror them. We'll sit or stand or do the little hand gestures like they do. But psychopaths do it very quickly. They pick up on that very quickly, and they know exactly what they're doing, and that's why they do it. And everything revolves around zeroing in on what you like when you first meet that person, what you think is good, the things that you might think are cool, or the things that you like to do. They'll zero right in on that, and you'll get a little hint of that. There's no way just to spot one, but you'll get a little hint of, I wonder what's going on here, because they'll ask you about these specific things really quickly after they meet you. And it's common when you first meet someone to ask them what they do and these kind of things, but they'll ask you one thing and they'll scoot on and do something else. They won't get into the details of it. If you like a specific kind of music, they may keep asking you questions about who you like. They'll move on to the next thing. And you like art, and they'll ask you the specific art, the artist you like. They'll get specific about some of these things, and then they'll dismiss that, but then they'll zero in on all those things and start peppering those into the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Scott, and from our perspective, I'm going to have Phil ask you some of these questions, because he was in the box doing interrogations during his NYPD career. Give us just generally 5 signs of deception, and then Phil can talk about his experience with that.
Well, we have to keep in mind, you hear the contrary to this, that people can say this cue means that person's being deceptive. This cue means that person's being deceptive. In what I do, I go straight to the studies. I stay in the scientific world with all those things. And I tell you what happens from a neurological aspect. And when I train in that, and anybody here from the 6th Precinct in New York?
I know. I was from Manhattan North.
Oh, okay. All right. Just a second.
I lived in the 6th Precinct for a while. I lived on Barrow Street back in the day.
Have you been down there lately?
I have not.
Ooh, yeah.
It's changed a lot, right?
A lot of change. A lot of change.
I used to love that neighborhood. It used to be beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, so there are no specific cues that'll tell you someone's being deceptive. So we'll take that and put that over here. But there are things that happen, and I always say in my experience, what I've seen is this. For example, if you're talking to someone, you're looking at the differences in the confidence they have in their answers. As you guys, it's odd telling you guys this like you don't know this kind of stuff already. So I'm going to pretend that I'm just telling you this like you don't know.
Well, the audience doesn't know, so that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
I'm looking at you guys. So it's kind of weird. So anyway, when someone isn't confident with something, one of the things that I always look for and always point out for people to look for is when you see little shoulder shrugs. We were going to the whatever it was, and you see that little shoulder pop. That just lets you know that person isn't confident with that answer. The only time I've seen, and this is just in my personal experience and a couple of people I know in the same business that we're in, is when you see a single shoulder shrug and the chin goes toward that. Quite often, not every time, but that sure ends up being deceptive quite a lot. There are other things you can listen for, what I call fading facts. If you ask me a question, where were you when this happened? Were you in the house? Were you in the back? Tell me about that. And the person may say this. And as they speak, the volume of their voice gets quieter as they go along because the facts fade. They'll say, "Oh, we started in the front because I had just come downstairs and she was sitting on the couch, and They said something about she pulled a gun out from under the couch, and that's when he ran upstairs. I don't know anything more about that. So the more they are being deceptive, the quieter they'll get because their brain says, we shouldn't be doing this. We can't be doing this. A lot of times people will think that when you break eye contact, that means you're lying. But what we know now is that when someone breaks eye contact, they're probably not the one lying because the person lying to you knows you break eye, that everybody thinks you break eye contact when you lie. But the liar will keep eye contact because their brain wants to make sure you believe them. So they'll keep looking at you when they give you their answer. They'll keep looking to see if you think like that. For example, if you were to ask me what's 14 times 3 minus 8 plus 1 divided by 2, and I went like this, let me see, 14 plus 8, and just kept looking at you, it'd be weird. I'd have to look away and think about it a minute and start counting. I'd look at different places and go, I don't know, I can't count that high, or I can't do math. My math is horrible, that kind of thing. Then that shows you that it's okay to look away. So a lot of people look away to think. And a lot of people think you'll look down to the left and that means you're lying, or you look up and to the right and it means something else. There are no studies that show that is something that actually that's a fact. That's not true. And people will stake their lives on that and say, oh, no, it's not people in law enforcement. But people, they'll look down left. I know, I've always heard it means that. You've always heard that because you've heard it from movies and TV shows and magazines, things like that. And it's all this horrible information. I'm on my soapbox about bad information. But if you guys get bad information, like about human behavior like that, it could get you killed.
Yes.
So in my position, when I'm training, I make sure all my stuff is, again, I want to stress that comes from scientific studies. Now I follow those things back to the matrix of who did it, when they did it, how many times they've done it, who else has done one like it. So back to the subject, you'll see things like people will fidget. Oh, let's talk about illustrators. When a person is emphasizing specific words and phrases, like I did just then, specific words and phrases, that's called illustrating. And you'll see people say, I didn't do this. They went over there and did that.
He froze up.
Oh my God. What a
Okay.
time to freeze.
Scott, well, we could talk about some of the stuff till you.
Yeah. We got him back.
No, I don't have him back yet. So
Bill, let me just jump in about the eye contact because he brought that up. And just generally speaking, when I was in the detective bureau, I did hundreds, maybe thousands of interviews.
he's back.
Okay.
Go ahead, Phil. Go ahead.
I did many interviews, hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe hundreds involving homicides. And each person that I interviewed, I did notice, and I agree with a lot of the things that Scott just said. They would have a unique thing that they would do when I knew they were lying. And I'm going to give you a quick story. And this turned out to clear somebody of a homicide. We had a homicide on a basketball court in the west end of Coney Island. When we get to the scene, witnesses are telling us, yeah, the guy that was killed was in a fight yesterday, blah, blah, blah. We don't have any perp identified. We get back to the precinct. The phone rings, a pretty stable informant gives us a name of the guy. A drug dealer from the neighborhood says he's the one that did the shooting. Within the 2 or 3 days, we get a hold of the guy. He actually turns himself in. Knew we were looking for him, comes in. We put him in the box. We start interviewing him. We know for a fact that the day before the shooting, he was at his parole offices because we knew he was on parole. We checked with the parole officer. He had been there that day. So when he starts telling the story, he's looking me dead in the eye saying, I wasn't there that day. I wasn't part of that fight. Blah, 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 blah. He was very engaged. And I took that as him being truthful, looking me straight in the eye. However, the minute we started to go off and talk about, well, we know that you deal over by the basketball court, he would immediately look down to the left. I believe there was a couch on the side, and he would look towards the couch, and he didn't want to talk about, he pulled back. He would go back and say, no, I don't know anything about that. So I knew that was when he was lying. So I picked up on that specific body language. And when he said he had nothing to do with the shooting and and he looked me straight in the eye, I went out of the room after like 2-3 hours in the box with the guy. And I told the lieutenant at the time, this guy ain't the perpetrator. Sure enough, we had to let him go. A few days later, we got the right guy. But that specific eye contact that he was making with me when there was something that I knew he was telling the truth about. He wasn't there for the fight the day before. I knew he was a parole officer. He was engaging me, looking me straight in the eye. Yet when I asked him about drug, oh, we know that you deal over, and he was on parole for drug dealing, so he wasn't going to talk about any kind of criminal activity while he's on parole, especially on parole for dealing narcotics. He looked away and down, and I took that as he was being deceptive at that point. Now, like I said, each person that I interviewed, I never had formal training, so to speak, on body language. They gave you a little bit here and there in the Detective Bureau, just I guess a few little tidbits. But what I developed was from talking to people, and when you know someone's lying and you saw their trait, whether it be they were going to look away, or like Scott just said, they'll raise their voice or they'll lower their voice as they're telling a story. I guess raising the voice sounds like they're more committed, but if they're trailing off, maybe that's where they're being deceptive. I think he just made that point. So what I did was I took each person and I tried to read that person, and I always developed a rapport with whoever it was. I mean, it was obviously a handful, one or two times when you just couldn't, I didn't do it. I had nothing to do, and I ain't telling you shit. You got those, and there was no sense in continuing on with an interrogation. But over time, you can develop a rapport with them, and you pick up on these little things. And I think that a lot of the stuff that Scott just laid out really, really makes sense, and I think it would be very helpful for any investigator.
Scott, one of the things you said before, I don't know if you followed the case of Stephan Sterns, who abused this young girl from the age of 9. He's going on trial for SA. I'll use the term SA. You know what that means. And then after that, he's going on in September, going on trial for murder of this little girl.
Okay.
But he is, like you said, when he's lying, he goes, I don't know. He has this like real whiny voice. He's one of the most disgusting individuals I've ever. I'll show you a quick cut from his interview by these two detectives.
Okay.
And he's also, his body language with the arms folded in front, which I always found to be also a sign.
Oh, this guy. I know who this guy is. Okay, I'm very familiar with this guy. Okay, I remember.
How's that? Because we found it in the trash.
Detectives went on to ask Sterns about explicit photos found on his phone. Photos we later learned allegedly showed him sexually abusing Madeline.
And I'm pretty sure you know what some of those pictures are about. You're a very intelligent person. And I don't want you to discredit yourself by saying you don't know about all the pictures that are on your phone. You understand what I'm saying?
Should I be talking with a lawyer right now?
He is smart enough to realize, should I be talking to a lawyer right now? Like he's just so despicable. And
isn't that putting up a wall when you cross your arms like that, or putting up a barrier? Isn't that
a lot of well, barriers are anything you put between you and the other person.
Okay.
And what we know now is from studies, crossing arms usually 90% of the time means absolutely nothing. In a situation like this, it's different because he's looking for comfort, and that's a self-soothing thing he's doing there. Because quite often people, they'll cross their arms, or they'll rock back and forth, or they'll push on their face, or they'll do their hand like this, or they'll rub on their arm. And that's the way they get rid of that built up stress and tension. And for something like this, he needs comforting. He's by himself. They've literally got him in the corner, and he's trying to comfort himself. So in a situation like that, that could be from the stress of the situation or whatever. It's not in this situation, but it could be from almost anything is what we found out. So it's really hard to look at that and say, oh, he's closed off because of this or that. But we know in this situation, that's why he's doing it. He's looking for comfort for himself. That's so he's self-soothing, we call that. So that makes a lot of sense at that point. But if somebody you're just talking to and they do that, I wouldn't read much into it. But in a situation like this, yeah, a lot of times you can look at that and say, this isn't good, because everybody knows that when you cross your arms, that means this. It means specifically you're against everything that's coming at you. You're closing yourself off. That's what everybody thinks is happening. And in this case, that's what he's doing. He's protecting himself, especially when it's down there low like that around the stomach. That's where that's the kind of thing we tend to take care of before anything else. When we're sitting down in a situation like that, when the stress is running high, because he's busted. I mean, his stress level is going through the roof. His mind is, how it is. His mind's racing. Got all kinds of things going on. What am I going to say now? So he's trying to structure that story to try to weasel his way out of this. There is no way out of it. So he's trying to decide what to do next. There's not much you can do after that.
You know, it's so interesting, Scott, that you do not talk or speak or teach in absolutes, because it was thought years ago that, you do that, oh, you're just being defensive. And through your research, you found out that's not necessarily true. And I bet you there's 10,000 detectives in New York City that still think that that's folding your arms across your chest is a sign of just being defensive.
I see it every day. I've trained federal judges that think all these old things we used to think were true or everyone thinks is true are true. And it's like, wow. And they're like, I always know when somebody's lying because of this. And it's like, oh, wow, I got some bad news for you. That doesn't mean much at all when they do that, or it means or it suggests. And these things just suggest these things. Everybody's different. The brain works different. Neurologically, we're all the same, but we're all just a little bit different because of the personality type. So we can't say every time they do this, they do that. And again, I'm not going to give out information to you guys that might get you killed. You might be in a situation, well, should I or not? Because they're doing this, you might shoot that person, and that might not be what's on their mind at all, that they're going to come at you or do something. It goes back to the basics. When you watch somebody, when you get somebody against the car before you cuff them, and you see that look up, they look around a little bit, and those nostrils get big, they're getting ready to run, and it goes down. That's the big stuff, but you can also wind that stuff down to the little things, Yeah.
Well, something that's so interesting, because I always used to get nervous when someone was like playing possum. They were being too compliant.
Yeah.
And you're like, there's no way this dude's this compliant. And that would alert me. I'm slapped. Like, I've been to apartments where we were looking to pick up a perp. And when he was getting a little bit outrageous, like we didn't want to handcuff him because we'd rather bring him into the precinct without handcuffs. But there were times that I said, cuff this guy, put the cuffs on him right now.
He's running.
I don't care if he knows where we're going with this. I want the cuffs on because he's dangerous.
Yeah.
I got a quick question for Scott. Scott, you said that in that case, him crossing his arm was, yes, it was some type of, what did you call it? Like a comfort?
It's self-soothing.
Self-soothing. But if he wasn't doing that in the early part of the interview, would that be a sign that perhaps now he's trying to be deceptive, or is it just we think because of the situation he was in, the pictures were on the phone, he knew the jig was up, and that's why he was doing that?
Yeah, because you have that, when you're talking about rapport, when you first come in, you're hanging out, pretending like you're waiting on something. You're just shooting the breeze and going, hey man, where are you from? All those kind of things. What's going on?
Scott, we use the Yiddish word called schmooze.
Oh, okay. All right. So anyway, when you're schmoozing,
we schmooze the guy.
Yeah.
You definitely try to build a rapport and try to, listen, there's good cop, bad cop. A lot of times me and my partner were good cop, trying to get a rapport going. And sometimes the good cop, bad cop thing came into, and then sometimes it was two bad cops if it was a bad guy, but I think that rapport was very important in getting, doing interview and interrogation for sure.
Oh, it's the main thing. I work a lot with embezzlers. And that's the key is is the rapport, because they want to trust you. And, when you go, listen, I'm here to help you, man. I'm trying to help you get out of this. And then
I was trying to put you away for 15 years.
Yeah.
No, my line was always, no, you're going to get 25 to life for the murder. If you cooperate, maybe you'll get 15. So, like, let's make a deal almost. But again, trying to get the confidence, the guy to drop his confidence and to trust you a little bit. And a lot of times it worked, to come up front, tell the story and, throw yourself on the mercy of your court, especially when you have a lot of evidence. So. Yeah.
Well, that's very common. What you're talking about it during that report. So when we get a baseline, see how they act when the heat isn't turned up yet. So this guy and on the behavior panel, we actually did, I think, 2 episodes on this guy. And but I didn't remember. We've done so many. You don't remember who you've done. So I don't remember the guy's name, but I remember what he looks like. And what we noticed as well was at the very beginning, everything starts. He's relaxed, and the more the stress is rises, the more it gets heated. The more he starts guarding. He'll put his arm in front of himself, and then that arm gets like that. Most of the times in his situation, it wasn't just all of a sudden he crossed his arms. He sort of moved slowly into it, like most everyone does in those situations. Because as the heat gets up, you start rubbing on things and thinking about stuff and scooching around your chair, and barrier with different parts of your body or different things. And in his case, he would usually just sit there almost like a frog, sitting there by the pond, getting ready to jump in. And as you know, the jumping in part, that's what you got to watch out for, because people like that, they can just bust wide open real quick and run or fight or do whatever they're going to do. So
detectives could have been a little more aggressive, I think. And Bill and I have said it before. They really were almost like treating him with kid gloves, even though they were putting a lot of stuff on the table about the phone and the pictures and all. I think had they been a little bit more aggressive and maybe a little bit more forceful, they may have gotten a confession. I think Bill will agree with me on that.
Yeah, well, we did a whole show on that, Scott, because they didn't recognize the signs. Obviously, no matter what they said, he was going to invoke counsel. So they should have went for the gusto and went for the murder. Instead, they were sort of pussyfooting around. Oh, we really like you. No, go for the throat. Go for the throat right now, because this guy, if you don't, he's going to ask for an attorney, and then the interview's over, as we all know.
Yeah.
But they didn't recognize those signs.
Well, where you guys were, could you go, are you sure you want to do that? Because when you do that and then keep talking, could you fish around like that?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, now, I think detectives are a little at a handicap now, because when they go into the room right now, department policy in the NYPD is that they must immediately read Miranda right in the beginning. We didn't have to do that. We would schmooze the guy for a while and get him to waive his rights. Now they go in there because everything is videotaped. They go in there and they got to get the prisoner, or even if he's not arrested, they have to get the person, as long as there's probable cause, they have to get him to waive Miranda. And that can be tough if you're going right into the box without schmoozing the guy,
Yeah, that's tough. But you could do a thing where if somebody brought me that and said, well, what would you do in this situation? What I would do, and I've done this, and it's hilarious if you do it right, is when they come in, if you have to read them, do it. Get that done, and then just sit there for a few minutes and have somebody come in, and what you want to do is make it you and them against the world. So when this person comes in, they've got something for you, you've got to sign, you've got some paperwork you got to get taken care of. So when the person comes in, they sort of throw it on the thing, and they don't hand you the pen, they just lay it down real quick. And then you sign it and go off and say, thanks a lot. And they just turn around and walk off. And then you look at the other person and you go, and then you sit there it'll be a couple minutes, I get some stuff done. The guy comes back in, and you say, hey, man, oh, thanks so much. And then you say, or you make it so it looks like there's a problem with you and that guy. So when he leaves, you can turn to this other guy again and go, I don't know what's up with that guy, man.
This guy's a dick.
Yeah. What an asshole.
Yeah.
Holy shit. You gotta be shitting me. Who did you see that guy before you? So that way you get that thing going. You get even tighter with him. So when you say, listen, I'm just here to help you, man. I'm here to help this. Let's figure out what happened. That's why I'm here. I want to get down to the bottom of this and find out what's going on. I'm just here to help you. Yeah, all that shit. So that's what I would suggest. And when somebody came to me with something like that, just put some time in there. And sort of bond with them by making everybody outside there is the enemy, because it's you and them against everybody outside.
Right.
So,
and Scott, going outside, say, the criminal realm of, interview and interrogation, going into like the realm of a salesman. We've all bought things we had no intention of buying through someone being a good salesperson. So I would think what you teach must be invaluable to a salesman or saleswoman trying to sell something, because they're reading the body language and they know when to go in for the kill, how many of these would you like? Would you like 2 or 3, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Salespeople love this kind of stuff. They absolutely love it, because one of the keys in that is the classic that we all know is the matching and mirroring, but doing that the right way. When you try to create rapport with somebody that you're trying to sell something to, it's really tough to go, so tell me about, you seem like a dang car salesman. But if you talk to him for a few minutes and you start, when it comes to speaking, the matching part, there are 3 ways that we all communicate. We see the world. You see things from a visual perspective, you see things from an audio perspective, and then from a kinesthetic or a feeling perspective, right? So when you're talking to that person, if you'll listen to what they say, they'll say, oh, that looks good to me. I see what you're saying. They're looking at the world from the visual part. So you start couching your words like that. You start talking about how the way things look. You start talking about the color of something. Those things. If they're an audio person, they'll say, I hear what you're saying. That sounds like something we should do. You know, they'll say things like that. You start talking like that too. You base things on the way things sound, because that's the world they're living in. It's a really small thing to do, but it helps a lot. And somebody who's a person who likes to feel things, is kinesthetic, pick it up, push it around, those kind of people, they'll say things like, yeah, he's a little, her personality is a little bit too sticky for me. I'm not sure about her. She's always a little hot when it comes to those kind of things. So you start talking about things in that, how things feel, even though you're not talking about the way things feel literally. You're talking about the way situations feel and how rough they are and how loud that shirt must be because it's so green, and how this or that. So you catch it one of those three things. At the same time, something that's good for sales is the mirroring part. And 90% of the time people do that wrong, because they'll say, if someone's doing this, well, you just start damn doing that too. So you'll see somebody come and say, hey, what's going on? Well, I'll tell you what's going on, but you have to ease into those things. Most people are on the impression that if somebody does this, then you have to do that too. You don't. People like to see things that are like them. And so you just want to give them, and these things aren't going to change everything. There's a you can get 5 or 6, 10 things going at one time. That may make a difference. But if you come in with just the audio part and all those things and the matching and mirroring, that's not going to do it, but it sure helps a lot. So what you do is if someone's standing here like this, if everybody in the group is standing up like this and you walk in the group, you can't just pop into that. You have to work your way into it as you talk to them about something. Well, they were telling me so-and-so and so-and-so. So I told them I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And then you're there. You have to ease into these things. So
Right.
They don't get the feeling you're mocking them or making fun of them, or they'll just see what you're doing.
Scott, I always found that the person that was the most difficult to get to tell the truth was the person that believed his own lies.
Oh yeah.
Because they didn't have that, nervousness. They were actually believing the lies they were telling. So
Yeah.
how the hell are you going to get them to tell the truth if they believe they're telling the truth when they're lying?
That's the person who does it for sport, pretty much, because whatever they've gotten busted in, they've said it so many times. They'll have this protocol they follow when they start telling stories, when they start lying about something. And for whatever that story is it something they've made up or something somebody else's story they're using for their story? Whatever that is, they're dang hunkered down in it. It's hard to get them out of it. So you ask them details around. You do these little mini interrogations around the small things they talk about. And micro interrogation or micro questioning around little details, and you get deep in those details and they can't follow them. They can't get to those details because those details aren't there. So that's one way I get into those. The habitual liar who has a story that seems to be like it's not true, but they've told it 1,000 times, and you just keep going down that road and just pick every little bit of it apart.
Yeah.
That's
Scott, there was a detective for Manhattan Special Victims. I won't say his name, but he was a great detective. And he would sometimes have the perpetrator tell what he did throughout his day in reverse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, that's really like, how are you going to lie when your brain is like overheating, just trying to think of what the hell did I do? Oh, you mean at the end of my day and go backwards? Oh my God, how am I going to do that?
But here's the key to that. You can't say, and I'm sure he'll tell you this, you can't say, okay, start at the back of your day and go back forward. What'd you do? You have to ask them, once you hear what they told you, you have to say, so you're at the store at 3:30, right? What happened right before? Where were you right before that? Oh, because these things are hooked together. The story is put together by the emotions that come along with it.
Yes.
You'll remember those things. There's not a gap there. We did this, we did this, we did, like remembering a set of cards, an ace, a heart and a diamond, all those kind of things. They're just connected together. So it's easy to go. You can go anywhere in that story and jump to the thing right before it because you were there. So that's the key is working them backwards, but jumping around in there and working them backwards. That's how you can make dang sure that they did that they told you about their whole day, their entire day. Because when they leave that time out, they'll jump time with things like, and then we went to the store. Really? Let's talk about the and then part of it. What happened during then? You guys know that.
Well, they tell the whole story and they leave out the most important part. You left out the murder.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I got a quick question for Scott, because Bill brought up about the sales. I was getting a car one time, and I remember clearly how the sales manager did this. They were trying to get an extra payment out of me. The deal was that I was walking out the door with a certain amount, but now they wanted to collect the first payment. So he walks over and he goes, "Hey, that's a nice watch you got there." I'm like, "Forget my watch," And he was trying to direct me in a different direction. Now I could recall when we're interviewing a perpetrator on a homicide or whatever the case is, and we're getting down to the nitty gritty, and he keeps pulling back, and then we would just change direction. We would go in a complete different direction, talk about something else to try and let it stew a little bit, and then go back to it. Is there a specific name for that? Is that like misdirecting, or can you add something to that, Scott?
Well, a lot of times when you want to do something like that and you want to leave something, then come back to it, you can totally depends on what the psychological side is that you're coming from, what your goal is in that situation. So that depends. I'd have to give me a little bit more detail about what.
Well, for the case I'm talking about is the guy is saying, "No, I didn't kill that person. I didn't do it." We're building up, and we get to the point where the actual murder takes place, and then he pulls himself out of it. No, wasn't me. It was somebody else. So rather than just keep hitting that same wall, what we do is change direction, talk about something else, or what happened earlier in the day, go back to something he did tell us, and then go back to that. And we would do that 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 times. You spend hours in the box, and a lot of times you would get to the point where I guess you wear them down, and then you catch them in a lie, and then I know you're lying, you're going to jail for 25 to life, and then they would spill the beans.
Yeah. Well, you can go if they've told you everything, man. Then what you can do is go to the end of the story and start asking them questions about that, and then slowly scooch back toward that time where you're under the impression that the murder happened. Right there in that little spot right there, you can work right up next to it. And as soon as they start cutting you off again, then it's in that amount of time. So what time were you there? What time were you here? Or they're not going to, it's not that easy, but you get the idea. So at least you can get an idea of when that actually happened if they were there for that. Because they're going to talk about everything else. Everything else is smooth. But that one section there, you'll know when you're reversing into it, that beeping will start right there. So that's your little time box right there where that most likely that happened.
Scott, I noticed that you studied interview and interrogation, the FBI, the Secret Service, U.S. military and intelligence, and the Department of Defense. How did they all differ in their approach to body language and interview and interrogation?
It's really interesting because you've got the FBI. Those guys are pretty much, they want to know, they're analytical people. So they want to know little details of things. They want to get into that's why you have the profilers coming out of that world. You have all kinds of the specific things coming into that world. When you're dealing with military people, they want it's like door kickers compared to detectives. Detectives want to get in and get all the details and all that. Door kickers want to they want to get the problem, address the problem right then, gather everybody up, let's get everything we can get, and then take it all over here. So the military is more like that. They're more like the big picture people. So they want the big things when you're talking about it. Some of them will want, because they're dealing with in-field interrogation. In other words, they'll be out in some other country dealing with people trying to get information from that way. So they're big picture people. When you deal with the Department of Defense, those people are more, they're I don't mean this in a bad way at all, but they're seem more like pencil pushers, you know what I mean? So the details they want are the things, just like if you gave them a book, here's what this is what this is. That's the way it feels like when you're training them or training with them. That seems like the kind of information they want to take in. It doesn't seem specific. And then when you deal with the detectives, and you guys, it gets detailed like we are here. Let me ask you about this. Let me ask you about that. What about this? So you get all these because you're dealing with all kinds of different people. Whereas someone in the military, they get varied types of people. In the FBI, they get all kinds of people, but they're very specific. But with you guys, it's like throw you in the street and there it is. Okay, we got to get this. Here's this, because you've got one right after that you're going to do, or 2 later that day. So your things are going to be more, we were talking about feeling things and that kind of thing. Yours is going to be more hands-on. So detectives are usually, they want the details specifically about, and they'll build a situation. They want all the details for that specific situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. But Scott, like the NYPD, for example, it's all on the job training. There's almost no formal training except they throw a new detective into the criminal investigation course, and they'll have some other detectives again come in and teach how they do interview and interrogation. But most of the training is just watching more experienced investigators. What they call
100%.
I'm going into surgery, when they're doing an interview and an interrogation. And that's how a young detective learns. And I would think learning from someone like you would cut to the chase more. They would learn a lot of techniques that they don't have to observe for years. They would still be observing, but they could get some techniques from you that aren't taught by the department. I think it would be invaluable.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's of course that's the way I see it. You have things you can take though. There are courses, like the read technique and those kind of things. But the problem with that is people will do the read technique and they'll do it once and they'll just do like the 1 or 2 days of it, the first 1 or 2 days, and that's it. And they'll use that for the rest of their career, and they won't know things have been updated, and they won't remember everything that's been done. They won't remember how to approach that. And when I read, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the read technique. And
yes.
For me, I use that. I always look at that and explain it as like it's a muscle car. You've got this protocol you can follow, but as you're doing that, you can paint flames on the side of it. You can have any kind of steering wheel you want, or you want to drop what kind of engine in that, what kind of wheels you want to have, what do you want the hubcaps to look like, what color is it? You can change it all for every person you deal with, and that becomes your style. So that's why I like the read technique so much, because you can adapt it to yourself and then you take things off and stick things on to help you get what you need.
Absolutely. CEO Digital Diva, I'm confused. I thought this was about Bryan Kohberger. Joined 10 minutes ago and still lost on what is being talked about, but not BK. Anyone want to shed the light? Well, CEO Digital Diva, we actually started out talking about Bryan Kohberger. What this mostly is about, though, is using body language to interpret behaviors, and specifically in police work and interview and interrogation, to get someone to confess or make a statement. And Scott Rouse is a body language expert, and that's why we brought him on the show. I'm sorry we're not talking as much. Mike, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just had a question about BK, Bryan Kohberger.
Mm-hmm.
Scott, when I watched the his admitting guilt in court, I noticed one thing. He didn't look towards where the gallery was and look for his parents. He spoke very little to his attorney. He looked at the judge and he was really physically far separated from his attorney. It didn't even seem like he even considered really her as necessary to be there. And while he was going, yes, that sort of thing. And then he stood up at one point. It was totally unsolicited, and he took Judge Hippler by surprise. And I was wondering, given the fact that the violence that he committed against these girls, is it possible that when he stood up, it was to show respect or that he was actually scared of Hippler? In a weird way, like he felt like he had to be deferential to Hippler while he's confessing to the most violent crimes that a person could commit.
I saw that
in that sort of body language.
I saw that. I think he was trying to show respect, and that's why he was doing that. And I think he's sitting there really still because they've said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to say this. Oh, you just say yes, and you just sit there and say yes. That's how we're going to handle this. They've got to keep control of that, because I believe what they're trying to do now is keep all the information of some other things that he's done during those things that isn't out yet. They're trying to keep all that together and not let it out. So they don't have any reason whatsoever for them to have a reason to go back and ask him questions or call him back or anything. So I'm sure that's what it looked to me like. They just said, look, you just sit there and say yes every time the question comes up. Yes.
Right. Don't look left. Don't look right. Say yes. And that's it. And he followed the directions perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what it seems like. Now, he may be the personality type to just do that. I've seen people that have had conversations with, or that knew him, went to school with him, said he was, some of them say he was a normal guy. Some of them say he was kind of odd, but I didn't see anybody say it. He just sat there like a frog and was looking.
Right.
But,
Scott, what's your opinion of Kohberger? A psychopath, a sociopath? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a psychopath. Puts himself in a position of power. Got in a position where he found out how law enforcement works, so he could get around all those things. Wanted to be part of law enforcement, so he could get in a position of power. It's all the hallmarks of a psychopath. All those things that tell you to be on the lookout for that person. Red flags for the possibility of psychopathy in that person. I'm sure if you ran him through the fMRI protocol, you'd see you're dealing with a psychopath there. They'll probably never do that, but I would think I'd put all my chips on it. You
think there was a sexual component to the whole thing?
That would probably be something that helped fuel it, because I think when you go back in the history of psychopathy, quite often you'll find that you're dealing with pornography and those things, and these fantasies get in there, and then they get loose from them. They said, and they separate themselves from everyone. They're alone a lot because they don't know anybody. They don't get along with people. They try to, they'll mimic you and try to mimic your behavior, but they don't understand why they don't fit in. Some of them fit in just fine and do great, and some of them don't, like this guy. So they're by themselves all the time. Those fantasies get away from them, and I'm going to do this. And sometimes they'll have a reason for it. Sometimes they won't. There may be, I can prove this. I can make all these things happen. Like that picture he took of himself in the bathroom after that.
Yes.
Shower and all that. Look what I've accomplished. But that picture was for him. It wasn't for anybody else but him. God almighty. I mean, that you couldn't go to Hollywood and go, look, I need a picture of a psychopath that just killed 4 students. Really bad scene at the crime scene, really bad. Then I need some scary kind of photo of him after he's cleaned up. Can you do something like that? Nobody would think to do that. That's wow. I mean, look at that. I'm looking at myself on here. For some reason, I'm yellow with the filters on this thing. But look at that guy. He looks like a fish, like you can see through his skin.
Scott,
he's got a look on his face like he's very happy. He's giving a thumbs up, like he accomplished something. I mean, you could really see that in his face,
Yeah.
We would call that as part of we all agree he was not a serial killer. He was a mass killer. He would have became a serial killer had he not gotten caught. No doubt in my mind. But this was what we would call a trophy, because this was on the same morning of the murders, and this was for him. This was for him to relive the experience of that, and in my opinion, psychosexual murders that he committed. And the district attorney, of course, Bill Thompson, wants no part of saying anything about that. But we've spoken to some professionals like Dr. Joni Johnson, a forensic psychologist, was just on the show this week, and she agreed with us. You know who she is. She's great. And we were supposed to have last night Jim Clementi, who was an FBI profiler.
Yeah.
And he's going to come on Monday, him and Bobby Chacon.
Oh, wow.
And they feel the same way about him, that, this was a psychosexual murder.
Yeah.
And he would profile him as that. But that really hasn't been mentioned by the prosecution in this case, because I think a lot of the Kohberger case has gotten politicized. The biggest part of the politics was them knocking the house down, which was absolutely ridiculous that they did that. And that was all the University of Idaho. It was hitting their enrollment, and they didn't want that. So they knocked that house down, which was the worst thing. If that case went to trial, that's the first thing you would have wanted, is the jury to walk through that house.
Of course. You see what's happening on the stairs. See how far away the rooms were. How did he sneak in? Because when you go and you do that, you see the nerve somebody has to do to walk through those things. And to do that, you can set up the 3D thing and have them go through it, but it's not the same as being there and going, oh, this is where it happened. And looking from the door into that room where that happened.
Just walking through would answer a lot of questions for a jury, because a lot of things were out there, like, how could he have done it so quickly, blah, blah, blah. But if you walk through it and you see, like you said, the rooms are close apart, he comes in through the back door, he engages the victims, and it could very easily be carried out. And you're going to have pictures tell one story. I always tell people that on 9/11, I was present after the collapse, and what I saw, television could not portray that. When you saw it with your own eyes, when you saw 210-story buildings on the ground in front of you, there's no way to portray it on a television screen or even me telling you. You had to see it to believe it. And that's the same thing with a crime scene like that. You're going to look at pictures. You're going to be told a story. But if you were able to go into that room and say, all right, he came in through here. Oh, it's just a few steps to there. Much, much different. That was a big mistake that I think that the prosecution made. And Bill, we talked about that many times. It was probably a political decision, should not have been done. As it turned out, there's not going to be any walkthrough by a jury because he pled guilty. But at the time when that decision was made, we didn't know that, and that was a mistake on the part of the prosecution, in my opinion.
I just want to address this from the chat. SAP, Bill Thompson explicitly stated there was no sexual motivation involved. He's wrong.
How does he know that? How does he know that?
He doesn't know that. He doesn't. It's politicized. He doesn't.
The only way he would know that is if Bryan Kohberger told him that, but that's not the case. That's a political statement.
And I think he may have said there was no sexual attack.
Yes.
Right. I don't think he said there was no sexual motivation because.
But you're not going to do that every time. That's not what that's about. A lot of the time, it's not actually doing that stuff yourself. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to delve in that, pretend like I know all about it. But it doesn't have to be a sexual attack every time. If you're dealing with someone who's dealing with something that's fueled by sexual, a psychology of sexual. I don't want to talk bad on you.
I think his motive was murder. His motive was murder, and it was compelled by maybe rejection with the female, with the opposite sex. That's what I believe. That he wanted to kill. He wanted to be a serial killer, and I think what fueled his anger towards these young people was he was either rejected by one of them or someone in their circle. And he picked that house, I believe, because it was an easy access. He reconned the location 23 times. I really believe it wasn't so much 100% a sexual thing. I think it was more he wanted to kill. He had the urge to kill. He wanted to be a serial killer. He studied serial killers. He had correspondence with serial killers and criminals. So I think that's what I believe. Only one person can really answer it is Bryan himself, but that's what I believe the motivation was.
Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, share us with your friends, make comments. If you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel membership, and you could become a member of the Police Off the Cuff YouTube family. This show, Scott, you're unbelievable, man.
Absolutely.
You just, I wish that I had a mentor or someone to teach me like this when I was on the job. I think I learned it like everyone else did. Plus, I was a boss, so I didn't do this as often as the detectives do it every single day. You know, and we sometimes watch outside through the two-way, the one-way glass, and determine whether the detective is going to get a confession or not. And if he's not, sometimes we change players in the box, judging on how they're doing and judging on also how important the interview and interrogation is.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But, you know, they say that you learn something new every day. Now, I was hired on the police department in 1982, 43 years ago. And tonight I learned some things about body language, and I really, really appreciate it. From the show in the past, there was Bill had a detective on that was involved in a major shooting, and they were saying that he killed somebody. I can't think of his name offhand, Billy, up in Washington Heights.
Michael O'Keefe.
He wrote a book, and he was talking about an arson, and he taught me something about arson. I didn't know that gasoline will leave a trace, whereas alcohol leaves very little trace. So the things that you learn from day to day, it's like you just never stop learning. And I really appreciate the fact that you came on tonight and enlightened us a lot about this body language.
No, I'll come back on anytime you want to. You just
I would love for you to come back on. Scott, I want to ask you one, because I know you're pretty close. You have to leave after about an hour.
Yeah. I've got more time than that, but I'm still good.
Okay, I want to ask you about this. Psychopath versus sociopath. I don't really know the difference, and I would love for you to explain it to us.
Okay. The way I explain it is this: when you're dealing with a psychopath, you're dealing with someone who has that neurological situation we talked about earlier. The brain isn't functioning properly. There are the connections in the frontal lobe and the parietal lobes. It's not functioning the way it should, and that's why they behave that way. They have no emotion. They don't have any empathy. Sympathy is you can feel sorry for somebody. Oh, I'm so sorry that you don't feel well. Empathy is when you say, "Ooh, I'll bet that hurts," a sore throat like that, to make that doesn't feel good at all. So that's empathetic. You're feeling the feelings that person would have. You're trying to think about what those are. Two completely different things. Psychopaths have no empathy at all. So they act like robots. It's just a body running around trying to please itself, in other words, an ego. Now, the sociopath this is the way I explain it. It's, for example, it would be like ISIS, those guys. They grow up seeing their dad kill little children, stomp them to death in the street. They'll kill their sister. You might see your father doing some horrible things, and he may have you do horrible things as a child. And the emotions you have when you're a little child growing up, those things nobody says to you, "Oh, don't do that to that little dog. Don't kick that dog. That hurts." When you do something, nobody explains those emotions to them or those feelings. So those things, and it happens quite often with people who have parents who are alcoholics. The dad beats them up all the time, that kind of thing. And so they don't get the compassion from the parents. They don't get those. Their emotions aren't nurtured. So they're not nice to people as they grow up. They don't see people being nice. They don't understand that. So you've got so they end up being very violent. Sociopaths usually go to prison fairly early. They'll stab somebody at a bar, that kind of thing. Whereas psychopaths, sometimes they'll plan things because they're able to keep their cool. You can make a sociopath mad much quicker than you can make a psychopath mad. If you go down that road of a psychopath is nature, whereas a sociopath is nurture. That's the way I see them. One is nurtured and the other was just born that way, or they've had an accident or taken some drug that's damaged their amygdala and the other parts of the brain that make them psychopathic. So that's the difference there. I'm trying to get these as small as I can to be understood, but that's the difference. It's nature versus nurture in that situation.
So wait a minute. One is basically you're born with it, and the second part, nurture, is you're raised because of some type of abuse, and you become that.
You remember the Iceman, Kuklinski?
Yes. Connecticut. Yeah.
Everybody thinks I don't think the guy was a psychopath. I think he was a sociopath. I think because the way he was raised, and he'll tell you the way he was raised, is very violent.
Vicious beatings. Yeah.
Yeah. And all that. And I think that's what that must have been and I think he got enjoyment with you thinking he was a psychopath. Because I've watched that guy for a long time. He fascinated me because I didn't see the psychopathy in there. I saw what everybody thought it would be psychopathy, but I just didn't see the psychopath in there. I think a lot of those things about the rats eating people and that, I think a lot of that might have been made up. But I don't think, for example.
Yeah, they said some of what he put out there was definitely made up. But I think that a good argument for a sociopath, he treated his family very well. Only, according to what he said, only when he was out doing these killings was he extremely violent. But he seemed to have like a double life, and he seemed to have, loved his family and treated his family well.
Yeah, and they say that. I mean, when you look at interviews with him, I think it was his son was talking about he was a loving father. We had no idea that any of that was going on.
Yeah,
because he could do that. He had empathy. He could feel for people. He would do things like that. If you listen to the way he talks, he'll say, like when he was talking about one he said, I should have done that. He says that a couple of times. Psychopaths would never say that. Even as a brilliant one, one that's got a high IQ or whatever, they wouldn't talk that way either. They wouldn't say, I shouldn't have done that, because it's going against that ego, which is, you've got narcissists, and every, psychopath is a narcissist, but not every narcissist is a psychopath. So that the psychopath, being the highest form of narcissism there is, he wouldn't or she wouldn't say, I shouldn't have done that, because that would, in other words, they're saying they've made a mistake. That's just my take on it. That's the way I see those situations.
Scott, a suicide bomber, psychopath or sociopath?
You're dealing with a religious situation there. People the true believer. Eric Hoffer wrote a book about that called The True Believer, that explains why people do things like that. What fanatics for an artist, for a singer or or a movie star, those kind of things. That's a fascinating book, The True Believer. And they'll explain to you why you can get someone from a religious perspective and just get them all hyped up and send them in to do something. A lot of times those people they're just doing what they think their religion tells them to do. They're just normal people. They're not normal people, but they're
believers.
Yeah, they're true believers. true believers. If
You know,
guys go
we had Sammy the Bull on the show, and really, Sammy the Bull is he's a serial killer.
yeah,
He was involved in 19 murders. You
Oh,
could
yeah.
put that Cosa Nostra to
Wow.
dress him up in a Cosa Nostra outfit, but when you strip that down, he's a serial killer.
yeah, yeah. How was it? Was it? I got.
No, he was very personable.
Listen, he's got a really good personality, believe it or not, like Bill just said, and I think he had a very, very business minded outlook on things. He was successful in a lot of businesses, and he, according to what he says, he believed that this was just part of being in Cosa Nostra, you know. And one of the things that he had the biggest hard time with when he had an order to kill a guy who was the true, the true value of Cosa Nostra. He was a made guy that had killed 50 people, and they had this guy, and he was just waiting for the order to kill him, and he was talking with the guy and stuff, and he said that was one of the things he regretted, that he had to kill a guy that was just like him and a real true Cosa Nostra guy. So I guess there's definitely an argument that he's a serial killer because he killed so many people, but I think his belief was that this is the way it is. This is it's like a cop takes an oath and you're going to do certain things. And if somebody points a gun at you and you're going to have to take their life, that's just part of it. And I was in 2 shootouts and both people that I shot survived. But if they had died, I mean, I think I would have been okay with it because they were trying to kill me. You know, maybe I would have gone to see a priest to just, get some type of counseling from a religious person, but I would be okay with it, and I think that's how he looked at it, is this was part of what his life was, and he was doing it for the cause, almost like a religious fanatic.
Yeah, it becomes part of your identity of who you are. I'm this person and I do these things. Yeah, this one's horrible, but I do that as well because it comes with being that. When you're talking about somebody like him, though, man. So it was an interesting conversation, obviously.
Yeah, well, he also has his own podcast, and he has over 600,000
You
followers.
guys froze up. Dang it! I hope that's not me.
Did I freeze up?
We can, no, you're good. Mike, you there? You're still there, Mike. Right?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I
I think we're all good. Scott, I'm going to go around the horn because I don't want to. I want to, first of all, thank you so much for coming on. You're fantastic.
Thank you. Anytime you want
A lot of people wanted to hear more about Kohberger, but we did speak about him, about his eyes and about his body language. But with the wealth of knowledge that you had, I just didn't want to pigeonhole you into just talking about Kohberger. Mike, I'm going to start with you. Your final thoughts.
I was just thinking, as we're looking at Kohberger and his successful start at being a serial killer, and thank goodness he was caught. And I compare him a lot to Dennis Rader when I think about the two. Dennis Rader was the BTK killer. Yeah. He had a family. He had several jobs. He was a member of his church. He was in like a local law enforcement officer. And I look at the fact that he was able to hide what he did under a veil of such normalcy. Yeah, he had a rigid personality and things like that, but his family talks about what a good husband he was, what an attentive father he was, and I have difficulty seeing that he could do the same things that Kohberger did in one night. And I'm just fascinated by the idea that you can have the same sort of horrific violence coming from 2 totally different personalities. It's a strange thing. So, thank you for giving me a little bit of understanding about the difference between like a sociopath and a psychopath. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Phil, your final thoughts.
Final thoughts. I have to piggyback what Mike said. Thank you so much for coming on. I think that we learned a lot of things. Like I said, you learn something new every day. And I was a little bit taken back when Bryan Kohberger was arrested, when we started to hear the profile, a PhD criminology student. It was almost like he was such a successful person trying to get his PhD, and he threw it all away to become a serial killer. Every one of the shows that I do regarding Bryan Kohberger, I always mention the victims' names, which were Ethan Chapin, Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonzalez, and Xana Knodel. God bless their souls, and may their families find comfort and peace. I just hope that these people will rest in peace and that the families can find some comfort. Again, thank you very much, Scott, for coming on, and it was a pleasure. And you taught us a few things, and I really learned some stuff tonight. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Yeah, like I said, I'll come on anytime you guys want me to. Let me know. I'll be here.
Scott,
thank you.
The next time you come on, and I definitely want to have you on again because I don't think we even scratched the surface. Okay. I would love to talk about the deception in politics, because I know that you've touched on that with, and
yeah.
if there's a better liar on this earth, I don't know who are better liars, and I'm not going to pick which side. They both lie equally.
Oh yeah,
A
that's how you
politician,
get your job.
right?
Yeah, yeah. We talk about that too. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to talk about.
It's
I'm not
fascinating.
politics, but just deception.
Right, deception, and it's fascinating because really, you talk about someone who's like a trained liar. You know, they're pretty much trained.
They lie for a living.
They lie.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
they used to call it articulation.
Yeah.
It's all how you articulate it, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
What amazing. Anyway, Scott, again, thank you so much for coming on. On behalf of myself, Bill Cannon, Professor Mike Geary, Detective Phil Grimaldi, folks, have a great night. Thank you so much for tuning in. And Scott Rouse, you're the man. Thank you.
Thank you very
Stay
much,
safe, everyone.
See you in a bit.
Good night, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.